Hey, it's Webs here with some huge news for Hearthstone Mercenaries, including a bunch of balancing changes and a new event and a new mercenary from the Battle Pass. So let's begin. The first thing we need to cover is Cthulhu. Cthulhu is going to be the next event, following suit of all the other old gods. Makes a lot of sense since we have seen all the other ones. And this event looks like it's going to be centered around dragons and protectors, and we're going to get 10 tasks like usual, and the final task will reward the diamond portrait for Cthulhu. So let's begin with what Cthulhu actually does. He is the first fighter for the old gods, and probably going to be the only one since there aren't any other old gods they could really translate into mercenaries besides Cahoon, but no one wants to talk about Cahoon. But for Cthulhu at max level, he has 10 attack, 85 HP. His first ability is Mind Flay, and at level 5, it is a shadow ability with a speed of 7. Deal this Mercs attack to an enemy, death blow, summon a tentacle of Cthulhu. This tentacle being a 5/15 and is actually his second ability where he summons one of these, while also refreshing the old god abilities by 1, which is pretty cool. And whenever one of these tentacles do attack, they give additional attack to Cthulhu, which makes him scale even quicker. Between these two abilities, he actually does pretty close to what a lot of people were predicting. They had assumed that he would have a very similar effect to the original Cthulhu in Hearthstone, where there would be some way to scale up his damage incredibly high, and most people also predicted he was going to be a fighter because he was the only old god actually left for them to turn into a mercenary, and thus he was the only one they could do that for. His final ability is Mask of Cthulhu, which at level 5 is a shadow ability with a speed of 4, cooldown of 10. Deal this, Mercs attack damage to all enemies, death blow, restore 20 health to friendly old gods. Really cool ability. It's a really big AoE nuke that is really quick. It only has a cooldown of 10, which means you can actually get it online pretty quickly compared to something like Rage Unbound on Yasharaj. Given you can spawn a lot of tentacles with Cthulhu pretty easily, I think this will probably be a really powerful payout for the old god team. It does kind of overlap a little bit with N'Zoth's AoE from his equipment, which might in theory just be better in most cases, but this can still be abused if you have ways to actually buff him up, especially if it's on the bench, which we'll see one way to actually do that with one of his later equipments. His first equipment is Heart of Cthulhu, which at level 4 is a battle cry. Summon a 5/15 tentacle of Cthulhu. It gains taunt but loses rush. This just protects your old gods that you actually want to protect. Decent enough equipment. I don't think this will probably be used too much. The next equipment is Maw of Cthulhu, which at level 4 has a battle cry, gain +4 attack, destroy a random enemy minion. This is good when you bring him off of the bench. However, I don't think this is going to be used compared to the very last equipment that we're actually seeing, which is Body of Cthulhu, which at level 4 is a bench ability, gain +5/+10 after you summon an old god. So if you're using this in a pure old god team, that means you're automatically going to be gaining 15/30 on him just at the very start. However, if you aren't using it in a pure old god team, but you're using him in combination with N'Zoth, his tentacles actually do count as old gods, which would mean in theory this mercenary should actually gain additional attack whenever you do summon a tentacle of N'Zoth, which could be incredibly strong and probably going to be the default equipment for him, because this also does help with his final ability to be as strong as humanly possible. Honestly, I think this mercenary is probably pretty good for a old god based team. You might not want to run Yogg-Saron in a team anymore for old gods, just because he has a little bit of not too much synergy with the rest of them, as the other ones scale with either attack damage or through giving their minions additional attack. Could be a really cool build to actually try out, and I can't wait to revisit the old god theme builds for mercenaries. Now for the other new mercenary, we're getting Sir Finley, who is a epic protector. He is the first protector for Murlocs. At max level, he is a 11 attack, 78 HP. His first ability is Adventure Awaits, which at level 5 is the nature ability, speed of 6, gain +8 health, and attack an enemy. If your opponent has fewer characters, gain Divine Shield first. neat little way to just give himself Divine Shield if you do have a bunch of ads that you've actually summoned with Murlocs. However, in a explorer based team, this probably isn't going to be the strongest ability. It really just depends on which equipment you're going to want to use if you want to use him in that type of team. And I've been waiting for a while to actually use all the explorers in one team. Between the fact that I had a feeling that Sir Finley was actually going to be the next Battle Pass mercenary, and the fact that Bran has been bugged since release, this is the perfect opportunity to try to do so. The second ability is Mercology, which is at level 5, a speed of 2, cooldown of 1. Discover a Murloc ability. This is any Murloc ability out of all the existing Murloc. When Finley is actually released, which means he might actually not get this pool actually updated. This is kind of similar to some of the things in standard Hearthstone, where the pools of certain cards didn't get updated after the initial set, or if they did, it was very rare. And finally, his last ability is Lead the Charge, which at level 5 is a holy ability, speed of 3, cooldown of 1, give a friendly character plus 12 attack, and Divine Shield. Give your Murlocs plus 5 attack. Honestly speaking, I think Sir Finley will probably be just better in a pure Murloc team instead of a League of Explorer team, which kind of sucks because I was looking forward to trying to make that work. However, again, you could in theory just do a mashup of both, because most of the explorers don't actually scale attack damage. The only one that actually really attacks is Elise, but most of the time you're just going to want to get the golden monkey off of her because of what the other mercenaries actually do in the explorer team. So I don't know how useful this will be in explorers, but this does seem like a very powerful mercenary for Murlocs. His first equipment is Maxwell Mighty Steed, which at level 4, your Murlocs have plus 10 health, your explorers have plus 6 attack. Again, another way to scale up the attack of your individual explorers, but I don't know how relevant that's going to be. The Murloc's additional 10 health is actually probably pretty good, especially because you're going to want to run this just for diversity in the team, though some of the other equipments might be a little bit better. The next one is Exploring Monocle, which at level 4 is a passive that causes Lead the Charge to also give explorers attack. This is one of those equipments that should have just been baselined in Lead the Attack, but oh well. It is what it is. Maybe in the future it'll be changed to being part of Lead the Charge. And finally, the last equipment we have is Finley's Pith Hat, which at level 4 is a passive that after a friendly character loses Divine Shield, deal 10 damage to a random enemy. If this has a way to actually scale up with some additional spell damage, this might be really good, especially in a pure Murloc team, as you do have ways to get a bunch of Divine Shields in a Murloc team. It's really funny that I think Murlocs at this point actually have better synergy with Divine Shield than any other tribe, including Holy, which is kind of funny in Mercenaries, but I guess that's their little niche that they're actually pushing forward. It's going to be interesting to see where he actually ends up placing in what teams, because I do have a feeling he'll probably be pretty good in Murlocs, but an Explorer pure team is probably not going to exist. There's not really any other Explorers they could be adding to make this team even better than it already is, unless they want to introduce some of their apprentice, which they possibly could in the future. All right, now for the balancing changes and the bug fixes for this new update. Bran Bronzebeard's second ability is now going to give plus 5 frost resistance instead of 4, and then any enemies that have acted take critical damage, which doesn't sound like a big change, but it is a bug fix to actually making it where if any enemies actually act between your own abilities and this use, it's actually going to be updated so they always take critical damage. This is actually a pretty incredible change, and honestly something I've been waiting to actually try to use, and it's really nice to actually finally see Bran being fixed. Also, the prediction that a lot of people were having that the equipments for all the explorers were going to be changed to say explorers once Sir Finley was actually released were correct, and no longer only affect the other 2 explorers that were mercenaries. This is just an easier way to explain the little tribe that we have going on with the 4 explorers that were added into mercenaries. And this is actually probably a pretty good change. It does allow you to actually have an easier time to trigger we're rich off of Reno Jackson since there are 3 additional Explorer mercenaries that you can actually use, and Extra Spirit just allows you to have an additional HP on like everything, and the end of the turn effect is just a lot better overall. Especially because it should actually just affect Elise herself too, now that it has been changed to give your explorers +4/+4 instead of just being Bran and Reno. Now for some of the balancing changes. The first one being Reno Jackson's equipment that casts a random Reno looted powers twice is now more clarified from what it was before, as it didn't really tell you what it was going to use, and it's just an easier way for most people to understand. And for the first big mercenary change, it's Rathian. Rathian is gaining an additional 5 HP at max stats. His Creeping Madness speed is being increased to 4 instead of 8, and Tail Swipe is going to deal 15 damage to an enemy, then deal 5 damage to all enemies to the left or right of it. Honestly, probably a pretty good change for Rathian as a mercenary as a whole. Makes him a little bit quicker, though it doesn't change the fact that his big fail payoff is really, really slow, which is something that I would have liked to see changed, but that could be very problematic if it get a change where it was a lot easier to get through that. I do think Tail Swipe not hitting a random mercenary anymore is probably pretty good, because you can hard target down a mercenary that actually wants to use it on, and also does do some AoE damage, which makes him a little bit worse against Trigor. But we'll be seeing a bug fix with Trigor, which might make this a little less relevant. Now, Drakthar is going to be getting an increase in 7 HP, actually 8 HP, and then his Spirit Guide is going to have a cooldown of 0. And then if you have Shamanism, gain Divine Shield and Rush. I honestly don't think this one will change much. Most people aren't going to be summoning Spirit Guides with Drakthar. Most people just spam his first ability because it can freeze your opponents with his equipments. But the main issue here is it isn't a orc, and because it isn't an orc, you can't abuse Spirit Guides in a orc-based team. And anything else, you just have better options than running Drakthar in, unless you want to actually freeze your opponent's board. Brightwing is getting completely changed, where she is getting an additional 1 attack and 11 HP. Her first ability is now going to deal 12 damage and then give the lowest health mark on your bench +3/+10, which is a huge change. It actually changes her completely, which means it's no longer possible just to hope and pray you randomly buff up a Illidan or something else on your bench. I think this is probably a better change overall, since she did kind of fall out of favor for some of the better bench buffing mercenaries. Phase Shift is also getting a change to now restore 25 health to this merc, and if you control another merc, return it to your bench. And then the cooldown is 1 for all levels of this ability. This is a change that actually makes it a lot worse. You no longer can just bounce her back if she's the only thing left alive, thus dodging a lot of damage. Not a lot of people are using Brightwing anyway, so I don't see why this is completely necessary for this ability, but it is what it is. Brightwing Ring equipment is going to be changed to have a bench effect similar to Maestra, that whenever a Merc dies, summon this and cast Fey Breath 5 at a random enemy immediately. I don't know if you would want to use this over Maestra, because that doesn't require your mercenaries to actually die. I see what they're trying to do, I just don't know how useful this is going to be. And finally, Brightwing's necklace is going to now be a battlecry equipment that gives your lowest health minion on your bench +15 health. Probably a pretty good change. You can easily abuse her with her third ability, Phase Shift. That, in theory, could be the reason why they're making it have a cooldown of 1 on all levels of the ability. However, again, I don't know how useful this is going to be. There are ways to abuse this, and Eudora and some of the other Battlecry mercenaries, but I don't know if this will make it where Brightwing sees a lot of play. In theory, it could, just because of the fact that you could buff up something on your bench that really, really needs a lot of additional HP to get off whatever combo that you're trying to get. But nothing really scales with HP right now, so again, I don't know if it will make any changes. Now for Andakondra, the first thing to be noted is she's getting an additional 1 attack and an additional 8 HP, and they are changing her equipments completely around because, as they have noted here, that she feels completely useless without her equipments, which was completely true. This is a great change. Serpent's Bite is now going to do 12 damage baseline and then another 12 at the end of the turn, basically merging in the equipment, and we'll see what the equipment actually gets changed to later. And Beast is also going to always restore 15 health to this character and whatever character you actually target. Good change. Toxic Venom is being changed to where after you cast 3 nature ability, summon a 0/15 Nightmare Viper, 3 left. I don't know if this one will be that useful. In theory, it could be a lot more useful than some of her previous equipments, just because of the fact that you could easily get 3 Vipers really, really quickly, and thus allowing you to actually buff up the Vipers as quickly as humanly possible, and thus being able to do a lot of damage with them. The issue with them, sadly, is the fact that they still scale off of their own HP. So whenever they actually do take damage, they do lose their attack, which is a little bit problematic for it. And then finally, Signet of the Wilds is going to be a Battlecry equipment that summons a 0/15 Nightmare Viper. Honestly, a really good change. Probably going to be the default equipment. I know Toxic Venom in theory could give you 3 Vipers really, really quickly. However, I think Signet of the Wilds is just going to be stereotypically better overall, as it does give you a Viper on the first turn, thus allowing you to actually have a way to buff it up if you really want to with Men Beast and healing herself. Now, Murgle the Oracle is going to be getting an additional 1 attack and additional 10 HP. His role was originally supposed to be the healer for Murlocs, and they made note of this, but he did get outvalued a little bit. His first ability is now going to do 14 damage and give your Murlocs 6 HP instead of 5. Decent overall change. I don't know if this changes much. He'll still be used in Murloc-based teams. This makes your Murlocs a little bit more tanky. Healing Wave is now going to have a cooldown of 0 and then restores 15 health to a character and 10 health to your Murlocs. This makes him really good in any team that isn't just Murlocs alone, or even just in Murlocs. It actually fixes his healing role quite a bit for a Murloc-based team, and honestly, probably a better reason to actually use him now than ever. And finally, his Dowsing Rod equipment is now going to make it where after one of your Murlocs take 20 or more damage in a single hit, restore 8 health to it. I do think it will probably be the default equipment for him in a Murloc-based team, just because of the fact it does give you additional survivability for Murlocs, which is absolutely needed. And now for Guff. Guff equipment that everyone always use, Bramble Thorn Totem, is now going to be just based into his baseline ability, and his equipment is going to be changed to another Battlecry equipment, which seems to be the recurring theme with a lot of these changes. And the new Battlecry equipment restores 20 health to your characters, though this isn't going to be used much given the fact that most people use Guff in their starting lineup for a nature-based team, and this basically is a useless equipment in those cases. Though in theory, you could also use him now with the equipment that gives all your mercenaries additional attack and HP if he actually gets a death blow. And I think that will probably be the direction Guff will be moved into. Garrosh is now going to take 5 less damage whenever he uses Makara. Good change overall, and the speed on this ability is always going to be 5, which is a lot better than what it currently is, where it turned out Garrosh actually was better to have a level 4 Makara instead of a level 5, because you do lose the speed tie bonus. I think this is probably a bad change for PvE, but it does help a lot in PvP. Lich King is going to get additional stats, and then Frostbite is now a speed of 5 at all levels. Cookie is now going to have a speed of 10 instead of 5, and restore 10 health to friendly Murlocs and Pirates. And there's even a dev comment here that actually will make a lot of sense with one of the later videos that I'll probably put out this week, where I was testing a bleed-based build for Mercenaries, and I thought, oh hey, because of how it's worded on Cookie's Cookie, in theory, the bleed effect should actually be increased by the Golden Monkey. Turns out, no, that doesn't work, even though the tooltip actually says it does. It's really kind of a funny little change. A lot of the mercenary content that I'm going to put out this week is going to be a little bit outdated since I don't want to re-record it, but we'll see how that all turns out. Zygira is going to have increased health, which is pretty good. I don't know if she'll see any play still, and her equipment is changed to the first time a friendly character is frozen each turn, because there's some infinite loops that could have happened if you faced another person with Zygira. However, that didn't ever really come up because no one is running her in PvP, and it's just a decent enough change, I guess, to prevent infinite loops. Uther is the biggest change, and he is being changed to a protector. The thing that they said is the fact that Holy doesn't really have a protector, even though Cornelius exists, so that's kind of weird, but it is what it is. He is the only one that actually scales with Holy damage, so that makes him a little bit better in a Holy-based team, though it does make him a little bit weaker against caster-based teams, which might be a little bit of a problem, but it does make him a lot better in something where you want to try to do a full Holy team and you are going against a bunch of fighters. This should help a little bit. His stat line is going to be increased to 12 attack, 91 HP. His Hammer of Justice is going to be 15 damage to an enemy, and then next ability is 3 slower instead of 12 damage. Honestly, I think the biggest change again is going to be the protector thing, and this might actually help Holy become a fully functional build. It's a team that I've been wanting to use for a while, but every time I try it just feels awful, and allowing Uther, which is a really good way to scale Holy damage, do something besides just being another caster for the team might actually make him a lot more playable. Though this does actually hurt the taunt-based team that I had a while back, because you no longer have a caster to put a taunt on. King Crush is going to have his Devil Sword ability have a cooldown of 0. Makes a lot of sense. This should have been the case always. I get it, early on this might have been a problem, but it is no longer a problem. His HP pool and attack is also being increased a little bit. Again, I don't think 3 health is going to matter too much for King Crush, but you never know. Kurtrus is also getting increased health by 3. I definitely do not think this one will actually see any increased play. Tavish might, because he was also already a pretty decent mercenary outside of this, and he's just been power crept a lot. Lord Draxus might see a little bit more play. I don't know if 2 additional HP is going to help a lot though. And Manaroth actually getting an increase of 6 HP might matter a lot. And the fact that he is getting 2 additional attack, just so you have an additional way to buff up your demons really, really quickly. Tamsin is also getting an increase of 3 health. She's already played. I don't know why this buff was needed. Voon is also getting a buff. He isn't really seeing much play anymore, but there was a little time period where he was. I guess this is just to help with him being power crept. Rokara, again, she was just really power crept, so maybe works will matter a little bit more. Ragnaros and Antonius are also getting an increase in health. I remember early on, Fire was one of the best teams for both PvE and PvP. This should help a little bit in PvE, which is actually pretty good. However, in PvP, I don't know if this a little bit of a HP boost is going to matter too much on both of these mercenaries. It might matter a lot more on Ragnaros than Antonius, but I don't see a world where it matters enough unless we see additional fire support, and I don't think we're going to see any of that in the next batch. Vanessa is probably the one mercenary that's going to get the biggest rework outside of Uther. Her stat line is going to be increased by 11, which is insane. Her makeshift weaponry is always going to deal 12 damage, but also be improved by stolen attack. This just makes that ability not completely useless if you don't actually steal attack from your opponent's mercenaries. Really good change overall. Honestly, should have probably been the way it was originally. And then extra pockets is now going to steal 4 attack from an enemy opposing this. Might be a little bit better than the old one, but I do think this will probably be worse overall, mainly due to the fact that it doesn't actually allow you to keep 10 attack whenever you do use makeshift weaponry. This is a change that wasn't absolutely needed. Maybe one of her other equipment should have been changed to be something like this, but maybe they just didn't want to have 2 makeshift weaponaries. I don't know how useful Vanessa is going to continue to be, because she already is a mercenary that not a lot of people play. She's a real fun mercenary. I just haven't been able to find a real good home for her. Ninzao and Vander, Deathwing, are all getting an increase in their HP pool. Vander might matter a lot. Nizao might also matter a little bit just because he is a little bit more tanky. And Deathwing, it's only 4 additional HP, so I don't think that's going to matter too much. However, the additional 2 attack on him might be a little bit more powerful. Onyxia is going to have 5 additional HP, which should matter a lot because she was really squishy, and that's the main reason why not a lot of people played her. And the tooltip on her equipment is going to be changed to be updated to say fire damage instead of saying nothing, even though it already scaled with fire damage. Really nice change to see. Not too bad. Lady Vash, Hooktuss are both going to be getting increased in their HP. Vash might actually matter a lot in a Naga-based team. I've been using her in a lot of teams recently, and she honestly felt really, really weak because she was such a low-stated minion. But Captain Hooktuss, I don't think we'll see much play just because it's really difficult to actually use her. Trigor is just being updated to actually not actually hit with backlash after he dies, which is a nice change. Murky is going to get increased health by 1, which isn't really that much, so I don't know why it would matter too much. And then speed of 4 instead of 5 on the Murloc summoned by his equipment, which is alright change. It's not necessary, but it's alright. Alright, so those were all the mercenary changes and the mercenary news. Let me know which ones that you're most looking forward to. I'm honestly looking forward to trying to make a League of Explorers team work. It's been something that I've really been wanting to try to do, but now that Bran is fixed and Sir Finley is going to be in the game, I honestly expect that team to be fully functional now, even if it is probably very bad in the end. And like always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.